In the warm summer of 1996, in the peaceful town of Riverside Falls, Connecticut, a place where porch swings still creaked on lazy evenings and screen doors slammed with the laughter of children playing outside, a joyful 9-year-old girl named Rebecca Torres disappeared without leaving a single clue behind. It happened on a sunny Friday afternoon in late June, the kind of day that smelled like freshly cut grass and promised endless summer adventures ahead. Rebecca had just completed her final day of 3rd grade at Riverside Falls Elementary School. Her classroom decorated with colorful butterflies and end-of-year artwork that celebrated another successful school year coming to a close. Teachers would later recount to investigators that they saw her skipping through the main double doors with her bright yellow backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her dark curly ponytail swaying as she giggled with 3 classmates about their plans for the upcoming 4th of July celebration in the town square. She told her friends she was taking her regular path home through the neighborhood, the same route she'd traveled countless times throughout the school year, passing by the corner store where Mr. Chin always waved from behind the register, then cutting through the small community garden that the town maintained between Oak Street and her residential block. It was a 15-minute walk at most, a journey so routine that Rebecca could probably navigate it blindfolded. Her mother, Carmen, was at home preparing Rebecca's favorite after-school snack of peanut butter cookies and cold milk, planning to help her daughter pack for the summer camp she was supposed to start the following Monday morning. But Rebecca never made it through that front door. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy true crime stories like this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too. Asterisk asterisk. By 3:45 that afternoon, Carmen's cheerful anticipation had transformed into gnawing worry that made her pace the kitchen floor with increasing agitation. She called the school's front office, her voice still controlled but edged with concern. The school secretary confirmed that Rebecca had been dismissed with all the other students at 3 o'clock sharp, right on schedule like every other Friday. Carmen immediately called Rebecca's closest friends, her voice growing more strained with each conversation that yielded no information. Nobody had seen the little girl after she'd waved goodbye at the school entrance, her yellow backpack the last bright splash of color they'd noticed as she headed toward home. By 4:30, Carmen was driving through the neighborhood streets with her window down, calling Rebecca's name repeatedly until her voice grew hoarse and her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. She stopped at Mr. Chin's corner store, at the community garden, at every house along Rebecca's usual route, asking anyone she saw if they'd spotted a little girl with curly dark hair and a yellow backpack. Parents she knew joined her search, recognizing the rising panic in her eyes, understanding instinctively that this wasn't a child who'd gotten distracted playing at a neighbor's house and forgotten to call home. By the time the summer sun began its descent, painting the Connecticut sky in brilliant streaks of pink and orange that Rebecca would have stopped to admire, the entire community of Riverside Falls had mobilized into emergency response mode. Police cruisers arrived with their lights, flashing silently out of respect for the neighborhood's growing fear. Neighbors formed organized search teams that combed methodically through the community garden, the surrounding residential streets, the small wooded area at the edge of town where children sometimes played hide and seek among the trees. Trained search dogs picked up Rebecca's scent from her last-used school shoes, followed the trail along her usual walking route for approximately 300 yards before stopping abruptly at the curb near the community garden entrance, where the scent simply evaporated as if the child had been lifted straight into the air by unseen forces. Riverside Falls was a close-knit community of roughly 12,000 residents, a former mill town that had reinvented itself as a charming suburb where young families settled to raise their children with a sense of safety and belonging that felt increasingly rare in a modern world. Main Street still featured the same pharmacy that had been dispensing prescriptions since 1947, the same movie theater with its vintage marquee where teenagers went on first dates. The Baptist church on the corner hosted community events that brought together people of all backgrounds. Friday night baseball games at the town field drew crowds who cheered for their local Little League teams. This was a place where parents felt comfortable letting their children walk home from school alone, where trust and community were the foundations of daily life. The Torres family embodied everything good about Riverside Falls. Carmen worked as a nurse practitioner at the town's medical center, beloved by patients for her warm bedside manner and her genuine care for everyone who walked through the clinic doors. Her husband, Miguel, had been a firefighter with the Riverside Falls Fire Department, a brave and dedicated man who'd save lives and serve his community with honor and courage that everyone respected deeply. But Miguel had died 2 years earlier while responding to a warehouse fire on the industrial edge of town when part of the structure collapsed without warning. The entire community had mourned alongside Carmen and her 2 daughters, attending the funeral in such numbers that people stood outside the church for blocks. Carmen had been left to raise Rebecca and her older sister Victoria alone, navigating single parenthood with grace and strength that inspired everyone who knew her story. The 2 sisters had formed an unbreakable bond after losing their father, clinging to each other through grief and finding comfort in their sisterly connection. Victoria was 14 years old, mature beyond her years, and had taken on protective responsibilities for her younger sister that went far beyond typical sibling dynamics. She walked Rebecca to school most mornings before continuing on to the high school 3 blocks away. She helped Rebecca with homework at their kitchen table, taught her to braid her hair in intricate patterns, read her stories before bed even though Rebecca insisted she was too old for bedtime stories now. Rebecca idolized Victoria with the pure, uncomplicated adoration that only a younger sister can feel. She wanted to dress like Victoria, talk like Victoria, be just like her big sister when she grew up. They shared a bedroom in their modest 2-story house on Maple Street, the walls decorated with posters of pop stars and horses, stuffed animals lining the shelves, their beds positioned close together so they could whisper secrets and dreams to each other in the darkness before sleep claimed them both. Carmen would often pause in the doorway, watching her daughters together, grateful they had each other even as her heart ached for the husband who should have been there beside her to see them growing up so beautifully. The family had survived devastating loss once before, had learned to find joy again despite the hole Miguel's absence had left in their lives. But now they faced an unthinkable nightmare that threatened to destroy what remained of their small, resilient family unit. For 12 agonizing years, the Torres family existed in a state of perpetual limbo, suspended between hope and despair, unable to fully grieve, but unable to move forward with their lives. Carmen kept Rebecca's side of the bedroom frozen in time exactly as it had been that final morning. The yellow backpack that police had recovered abandoned near the community garden entrance hung on its designated hook by the bedroom door. Rebecca's favorite stuffed elephant sat propped against her pillow, its fabric worn soft from years of tight hugs. Artwork from school remained taped to the walls, crayon creations of rainbows and families and summer flowers that now served as devastating reminders of innocence destroyed and childhood stolen away. Every year on Rebecca's birthday in March, Carmen baked a chocolate cake with vanilla frosting, Rebecca's favorite, and lit 9 candles that never increased in number because Rebecca would always be 9 years old in these rituals. She sang happy birthday in a trembling voice while Victoria sat beside her, both of them crying as they made silent wishes for an impossible miracle. The bedroom became a sacred space, a shrine to a life interrupted, and Carmen couldn't bring herself to change anything because changing it would mean accepting that Rebecca was never coming home to claim these belongings again. Victoria grew into adulthood, carrying an unbearable burden of guilt that no teenager should have to shoulder. On that particular Friday, she'd stayed after school for an extra rehearsal for the drama club's end-of-year production. Just 90 minutes that had seemed completely insignificant at the time, but had cost her baby sister everything. She replayed that decision endlessly in her mind over the years, torturing herself with alternate scenarios, imagining how her presence during Rebecca's walk home might have changed the entire outcome, how she might have protected Rebecca for whatever monster had taken her away from their family. The guilt shaped every aspect of Victoria's teenage years and young adulthood. She struggled academically despite her natural intelligence, unable to concentrate when every little girl she passed on the street reminded her of Rebecca. She withdrew from friendships that had once meant everything to her, isolating herself from classmates who grew tired of her persistent sadness, who wanted her to somehow move past this tragedy and return to normal. How could anything ever be normal again when her baby sister was somewhere out there suffering or worse, and Victoria hadn't been there to prevent it from happening in the first place? The investigation into Rebecca's disappearance consumed the Riverside Falls Police Department for the first 18 months, with dedicated officers following every lead, no matter how tenuous. Detective James Morrison, a 20-year veteran of the force with a reputation for never giving up on cases involving children, made Rebecca's case his personal mission. He conducted hundreds of interviews, pursued every tip that came through the dedicated hotline, spent countless off-duty hours reviewing files and evidence, searching for the one detail that everyone else might have missed. Local registered offenders were thoroughly investigated and cleared through solid alibis. Teachers, staff members, parents who had been present at the school that afternoon all had their movements accounted for and verified. Security cameras from the handful of businesses in town showed nothing unusual or suspicious. Rebecca had simply vanished somewhere between the school entrance and the community garden, as if she'd stepped through an invisible doorway into another dimension entirely. Age-progressed photographs were commissioned and widely distributed every few years, showing what Rebecca might look like at 13, at 16, and 19. They were posted on early missing children websites, featured on the local news during slow news cycles, displayed in the post office and police station. But as the years accumulated like dust on forgotten shelves, public attention inevitably shifted toward newer disappearances, fresher tragedies. Rebecca's case joined the growing file of cold cases, another missing child poster slowly fading in the sun, another family's private anguish that the world gradually stopped thinking about. Carmen never stopped thinking about Rebecca for a single moment. She couldn't. Every dark-haired child she glimpsed in a crowd made her heart lurch painfully. Every time the phone rang, she experienced a split second of desperate hope before reality crashed back down. She joined support groups specifically for families of missing children, sitting in circles of folding chairs with other devastated parents, sharing the unique torture of not knowing whether to grieve or keep hoping, existing in an endless purgatory where neither healing nor closure was remotely possible. Victoria never forgot either, couldn't possibly forget when the guilt followed her like a persistent shadow into every corner of her life. It influenced every decision she made, every relationship she attempted to build, and subsequently sabotaged. She stayed in Riverside Falls after graduating high school instead of accepting the college scholarships she'd earned, unable to leave the place where Rebecca had last been seen alive, as if maintaining her presence there might somehow will her sister back into existence. She needed to be available if Rebecca came home, needed to be there for her mother who had aged 2 decades in the 12 years since that sunny Friday afternoon destroyed their lives. By 2008, Victoria was 26 years old, working as a bartender at the Riverside Tavern on Main Street, a local establishment that had been serving the community for over 50 years. The job wasn't fulfilling or particularly well-paying, but kept her anchored to home, close to her mother, who looked more fragile with each passing year. Victoria worked the evening shifts most nights, serving drinks and comfort food to regulars who knew her family's story, who asked after her mother with genuine concern, who sometimes looked at her with pity she'd learned to accept as part of her daily existence. It was a Wednesday evening in early September, the kind of crisp early autumn night when the air smelled like approaching rain and falling leaves. The summer tourists had returned to their cities, leaving Riverside Falls to its year-round residents. The tavern was moderately busy that evening, with its usual weeknight crowd of locals unwinding after work, the comfortable buzz of conversation filling the dark wood-paneled space. Victoria was behind the bar mixing drinks and making small talk on autopilot when the door opened at 7:30, admitting a young woman who immediately caught Victoria's attention in a way she couldn't quite explain. The woman was petite and painfully thin, her frame almost fragile-looking under an oversized navy blue hoodie and faded jeans that hung loosely on her hips. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and her face was pale and drawn, as if she hadn't seen proper sunlight in years. But it was something about the way she moved that made Victoria's breath catch in her throat. The slight hesitation in her step, the way she glanced nervously around the room before choosing a table in the farthest corner away from other patrons, the manner in which she kept her back to the wall as if she needed to see all exits simultaneously. This was someone who had learned to be constantly vigilant, constantly afraid. The young woman kept her head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone as she settled into her seat. When Victoria approached with a menu, she noticed the woman's hands were trembling slightly as she accepted it, noticed how her eyes darted toward the door every few seconds as if expecting someone threatening to walk through at any moment. "Can I get you something to drink?" Victoria asked gently, using the soft tone she developed for customers who seemed troubled or distressed. "Just water, please," the young woman said quietly, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the tavern. "And maybe, do you have soup? Anything warm?" "We have chicken noodle and tomato basil tonight," Victoria replied. "Both are homemade and really good." "Chicken noodle sounds perfect," the woman said, still not making eye contact. "Thank you." Victoria brought the water and placed the soup order with the kitchen, but found herself unable to stop glancing toward that corner table. Something about this woman triggered a feeling she couldn't name, a sense of recognition that didn't quite make logical sense. She'd seen countless faces across this bar over the years, serve hundreds of customers, but this one felt different in a way that made her heart beat faster. When Victoria delivered the soup 15 minutes later, she noticed more details that made her pulse quicken with impossible speculation. The woman's hands, though thin and scarred in places, had long, delicate fingers. The way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her left ear was a gesture Victoria had seen 1,000 times in her childhood. And there, barely visible on the woman's right forearm as her sleeve rode up slightly, was what looked like a distinctive birthmark, an irregular shape that resembled a small maple leaf. Victoria felt her knees go weak. Rebecca had been born with that exact birthmark in that exact location. Carmen used to joke that it proved Rebecca was meant to live on Maple Street forever, that she was literally marked as a Riverside Falls native from birth. "Is there anything else you need?" Victoria asked, her voice coming out shakier than she intended, her professional composure cracking under the weight of impossible hope and terrifying possibility. The young woman finally looked up, and their eyes met fully for the first time. Victoria felt the world tilt on its axis. Those eyes, deep brown with distinctive golden flecks near the pupils, eyes Victoria had known her entire childhood, eyes that used to light up with laughter when they played together in their shared bedroom. Recognition flashed across the young woman's face, swift and undeniable and absolutely terrifying. Her face drained of what little color it had. Her hands began shaking violently, and tears instantly filled those familiar eyes and began spilling down her hollow cheeks. "Vicky," she whispered, using the nickname that only one person in the entire world had ever called Victoria. "Is it really you?" Victoria couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what was happening. Her hand flew to her mouth to suppress the sob that tried to escape. "Rebecca," she whispered back, her voice breaking completely on her sister's name. "Oh my God, Rebecca, is that you?" The young woman nodded, tears streaming freely now, her whole body trembling so violently that the water glass rattled against the table. "It's me, Vicky. It's really me. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." The bar around them seemed to fade into irrelevance. Victoria moved on pure instinct, sliding into the booth beside her sister and pulling her into an embrace that 12 years of grief and longing and guilt had been building toward. Rebecca collapsed against her, sobbing with a raw, broken sound that came from somewhere deep inside where years of pain and suffering had been locked away. "I thought I'd never see you again," Rebecca cried into Victoria's shoulder, clinging to her sister with desperate strength. "He told me you'd forgotten about me. He said Mom moved away and got married again and that neither of you ever talked about me anymore. He said I was dead to everyone who used to love me." "No," Victoria said fiercely, holding Rebecca tighter, feeling her sister's fragile frame shaking against her. "Never, Rebecca, never. We never stopped looking for you. Mom kept your room exactly the same. Your bed, your stuffed animals, your drawings on the wall. Everything is still there waiting for you. We lit candles on your birthday every single year. We never gave up hope that you'd come home." Rebecca pulled back slightly, her tear-stained face a mixture of hope and disbelief and lingering fear. "Really? You really never stopped looking?" "Not for 1 second in 12 years, Victoria said, tears streaming down her own face now. "Mom is still in the same house on Maple Street. I'm still here in Riverside Falls. We stayed because we needed to be here when you came home. And you did, Rebecca. You came home." The handful of customers in the tavern had noticed the emotional scene unfolding and were watching with a mixture of confusion and concern. Bill Thompson, the tavern's owner and a man who'd known the Torres family for decades, approached cautiously. "Victoria, is everything all right?" he asked gently, his weathered face creased with worry. Victoria looked up at him, her face shining with tears and something that looked almost like joy despite the circumstances. "Bill, this is my sister. This is Rebecca. She came home." Bill's face went white with shock. He'd been at the original search party 12 years ago, had donated money to the reward fund, had never forgotten the little girl with the yellow backpack. "Dear sweet Lord," he whispered. "Rebecca Torres? Is it really you?" Rebecca nodded, shrinking slightly under the attention, but finding courage in Victoria's protective arm around her shoulders. "We need to call the police," Bill said immediately, his professional instincts kicking in despite his emotional response. "And your mother, Victoria. Carmen needs to know right now." "Not yet," Victoria said, holding Rebecca closer as her sister tensed with fear at the mention of police. She could feel Rebecca's heartbeat racing, could sense the terror radiating from her fragile form. "Rebecca, it's okay. We need to call them because whoever took you needs to be arrested. You're safe now, I promise. But we need to make sure he can never hurt you again or take anyone else. Do you understand?" Rebecca took a shaky breath, her voice barely a whisper. "What if he finds out I told? What if he comes looking for me?" "Vicky, you don't understand what he's capable of, what he threatened to do if I ever try to leave or tell anyone. He won't get the chance," Victoria said with steel in her voice, channeling a protective fierceness she'd never known she possessed. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you ever again. The police will protect you. I'll protect you. You're not alone anymore, Rebecca. You're home, and you're safe." Bill had already moved to the phone behind the bar, dialing 911 with hands that shook slightly. Victoria could hear him speaking in low, urgent tones, explaining the situation that must have sounded absolutely impossible to the dispatcher on the other end. "Rebecca," Victoria said gently, turning her sister's face toward her with infinite care. "I need you to tell me what happened. Who took you that day? Where have you been all these years?" Rebecca's eyes filled with fresh tears, her voice trembling as she began to speak the truth she'd been carrying alone for so long. "Do you remember Mr. Patterson, the custodian from my elementary school?" Victoria felt ice flood her veins. Gerald Patterson had been the head janitor at Riverside Falls Elementary for years, a quiet man in his early 50s who'd always seemed kind and helpful, who'd let children help him feed the classroom fish, who'd known all the students' names. He'd been questioned extensively after Rebecca's disappearance, had claimed he'd left work early that day for a family emergency out of state. His alibi had checked out. A sister in Rhode Island confirmed he'd arrived at her house that evening to help with their sick mother. The police had cleared him and moved on to other suspects. He was waiting near the community garden that day. Rebecca continued, her words coming faster now, as if a dam had broken inside her. I was walking home by myself, and I saw him by the garden shed. He called out to me, said he found an injured baby bird that needed help, asked if I could come look at it for just a minute. I trusted him, Vicky. He worked at my school. He was always nice to us kids. I didn't think twice about walking over to help. Oh, Rebecca! Victoria breathed, her heart shattering for the innocent child her sister had been. As soon as I got close enough, he grabbed me, Rebecca said, tears streaming steadily now. He put his hand over my mouth, so I couldn't scream, picked me up like I weighed nothing, and carried me to his van that was parked on the street. I tried to fight, tried to kick and scratch, but he was so much stronger than me. He threw me in the back of the van and drove away before anyone could see what was happening. Where did he take you? Victoria asked, though part of her dreaded hearing the answer, dreaded knowing her sister had been suffering somewhere close by all these years. His house, Rebecca said. It's on the outskirts of town, past the old quarry on Morton Road. You know where those few houses are set way back from the road behind all those trees? His is the last one, completely hidden from view unless you know exactly where to look. Victoria knew the area, a remote section of Riverside Falls where only a handful of homes existed, separated by acres of wooded land. It was the kind of place where you could hide anything, where screams would never reach another living soul. He had a room prepared in his basement, Rebecca continued, her voice hollow with remembered horror. It had a bed, a small bathroom, a lock on the outside of the door. He'd obviously been planning this for a while, had everything ready. That first night, he told me that my family didn't want me anymore because I'd been a bad girl. He said Mom couldn't handle raising me alone after Dad died, that you were glad I was gone because you didn't want to share a room anymore. He said the police had stopped looking because everyone assumed I'd run away. That was all lies, Victoria said fiercely, gripping Rebecca's hands tightly. All of it. Mom was destroyed when you disappeared. I was destroyed. The entire town searched for weeks. You were never unwanted, never forgotten, never anything but desperately missed every single day. I know that now, Rebecca said softly. But I was 9 years old, and I was terrified, and he was the only voice I heard for years. Eventually, I started believing him because what other choice did I have? How did you survive? Victoria asked gently. What happened over these 12 years? Rebecca took a shaky breath, her eyes distant as she recalled horrors Victoria could barely imagine. For the first few years, he kept me locked in that basement room almost all the time. He'd bring me food twice a day, let me out only to use the bathroom while he stood outside the door. He controlled everything, what I ate, what I wore when the lights went on or off. I tried to keep track of time by counting days, but eventually I lost count. The isolation was almost worse than anything physical he did. Victoria felt rage building in her chest, hot and consuming, but she kept her voice calm for Rebecca's sake. Did he hurt you? I need to know, Rebecca. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak for a moment as sobs choked her voice. When she finally continued, her words were barely audible. He hurt me in ways I can't talk about yet, ways I don't have words for. He said I belonged to him now, that I was his daughter and his responsibility, but the way he treated me was nothing like how a father should treat a daughter. The abuse was constant, a reminder every day that I was completely under his control, completely powerless. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face, felt sick with rage and helplessness for what her baby sister had endured. I'm so sorry, Rebecca. I'm so sorry I wasn't there to protect you. It wasn't your fault, Rebecca said, squeezing Victoria's hands. I need you to know that. This was never your fault. You were just a kid yourself. What changed? Victoria asked. How did you get away? How are you here now? Rebecca's expression shifted slightly, showing a hint of strength beneath the trauma. About 3 years ago, he started letting me come upstairs sometimes when he was home. I think he thought he'd broken me completely, that I'd given up any hope of escape. He made me cook dinner, clean the house, do laundry, pretending we were some twisted version of a normal family. But he always watched me closely, always reminded me what would happen if I tried anything. What did he say would happen? Victoria asked. He said he'd kill me and then kill you and Mom, Rebecca said simply. He showed me he knew where you both still lived. He'd drive past our house sometimes and describe what he'd seen, what Mom was wearing, what car you were driving. He proved he was watching, that he could get to you anytime he wanted. I was terrified that if I escaped, he'd make good on those threats. But you did escape, Victoria said. You're here now. What gave you the courage? Rebecca's face crumpled slightly. About a year ago, he started sending me to the grocery store on Elm Road to buy supplies. Always with strict instructions to go directly there and back. Always with threats about what would happen if I deviated or told anyone. At first, I was too terrified to even look at other people in the store. But gradually, over months of these trips, something inside me started waking up again. What woke up? Victoria asked softly. Hope, Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. I'd seen normal families shopping together, hear children laughing, watch people living regular lives, and I'd remember that I used to have that too. I'd remember you and Mom and our house on Maple Street. And I started thinking that maybe, just maybe if I was brave enough, I could have it again. When did you decide to run? Victoria asked. 2 weeks ago, I saw a little girl in the grocery store, Rebecca said, her voice thick with emotion. She was maybe 9 or 10 years old, with dark curly hair like mine used to be. She was with her mother, and they were laughing about something, and the mother was hugging her, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep being his prisoner while children like I used to be were out there living free, being loved, being safe. Victoria squeezed her sister's hands, encouraging her to continue. Today was supposed to be another grocery run, Rebecca said. He gave me money and his list like usual. But instead of going to the store, I just started walking in the opposite direction. I walked along back roads where his truck wouldn't spot me. I hid in the woods when I heard cars coming. I walked for hours until I saw the lights of downtown Riverside Falls, and then I just followed them toward Main Street. I didn't know if our house would still be there, if you'd still be here, but I had to try. I had to know if there was anything left of the life he stole from me. There's everything left, Victoria said fiercely. We're all still here. We never left. We were waiting for you. Outside, sirens approached, their lights reflecting off the tavern windows. Rebecca tensed, her eyes widening with fear, her body preparing to run. It's okay, Victoria said quickly, holding her sister close. They're here to help. They're going to arrest Patterson tonight, and you're never going to have to be afraid of him again. I promise you, Rebecca, this nightmare is ending tonight. 3 police cars pulled up outside the tavern. The first officer through the door was Detective James Morrison, now in his 50s with silver threading through his hair, but Victoria recognized him immediately as the detective who'd worked Rebecca's case all those years ago, who'd never given up even when the trail went cold. Morrison stopped dead when he saw Rebecca, his hand going to his chest as if he'd been physically struck. Dear God, he whispered. Rebecca Torres? Is it really you? Rebecca nodded, pressing closer to Victoria as more officers entered the tavern. Please don't take me away from my sister, she said quietly. I can't be alone right now. You won't be alone, Morrison said, his voice gentle despite the urgency Victoria could see in his eyes. Your sister can stay with you through everything. But Rebecca, I need you to tell me who took you. We need to act fast before he realizes you're gone. Rebecca's voice was steadier than before, strengthened by Victoria's presence beside her. Gerald Patterson, the custodian who used to work at Riverside Falls Elementary. He lives at 847 Morton Road, past the old quarry. The house is set way back from the road behind pine trees. He's probably there right now, wondering where I am. Morrison turned to his officers, his voice sharp with command. Get units to that address immediately. Gerald Patterson, 847 Morton Road. I want him in custody within 30 minutes. And call the state police. We need crime scene investigators and a full tactical response. Go! Officers scattered, radios crackling with urgent communications. Within minutes, a coordinated response was racing toward Morton Road while Victoria held her sister close and whispered that everything would be okay now, that the nightmare was finally ending. Morrison approached their table more carefully, pulling up a chair. Rebecca, I need to take you to the hospital first to make sure you're okay, and then to the station to give a statement. Victoria can come with you for all of it. Is that acceptable? Rebecca looked at her sister, fear still evident in her eyes. You'll really stay with me? I'm not leaving your side ever again, Victoria promised. Not for a single second. Before we go, Morrison said gently, we should call your mother. She needs to know you're alive and safe. Fresh tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks. Is she really still in her house? Is she okay? She's right where she's always been, Victoria said, pulling out her cell phone with trembling hands. She never left, never stopped hoping you'd come home. Victoria dialed the familiar number, her heart pounding. Carmen answered on the second ring, her voice tired and worried like it always was when Victoria called unexpectedly. Vicky, is something wrong? Are you okay? Mom, Victoria said, and her voice cracked completely on the word. Mom, I need you to sit down right now. What happened? Carmen's voice rose with immediate panic. Are you hurt? What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Mom, Victoria said, crying and laughing simultaneously. Everything's right for the first time in 12 years. Rebecca is here with me at the tavern. She's alive, Mom. Our Rebecca is alive, and she's safe, and she came home to us. The sound that came through the phone was barely human, a primal wail of grief and joy and disbelief all tangled together. Victoria heard something crash, heard her mother sobbing incoherently, heard her try to form words through tears that made speech impossible. Mom, breathe, Victoria said, her own tears flowing freely. The police are here now. We're going to the hospital and then the station, and then I'm bringing her home to you. I'm bringing our girl home. Is it really her? Karma managed to choke out between sobs. Vicky, are you absolutely sure? Please tell me you're sure. It's her, Mom, Victoria said, looking at Rebecca, who was crying silently. She has the maple leaf birthmark on her arm and that tiny scar above her eyebrow from when she fell off the swings in kindergarten. She called me Vicky. It's our Rebecca, Mom. She came back to us. Let me hear her voice, Carmen begged. Please, I need to hear her voice. Victoria handed the phone to Rebecca, who took it with shaking hands and pressed it to her ear. Mama, she whispered, and then she couldn't say anything more, just sobbed while Carmen sobbed on the other end of the line. My baby girl, Carmen kept saying over and over through her tears. My sweet baby girl, you're alive. You're really alive. I never stopped believing. I never stopped waiting for you to come home. Imsuri, manarabikakrid. I'm so sorry I was gone so long. I wanted to come home every single day, but I couldn't. I tried, Mama. I really tried. Hush, baby, Carmen said through her tears. You have nothing to apologize for. You survived. You're alive. You came home. That's all that matters. That's everything in the world. Victoria gently took the phone back. Mom, we have to go now. The police need to take Rebecca to get checked out, and then she needs to give a statement. I'll call you from the hospital, okay? I love you. I love you both so much, Carmen said, her voice shaking. Tell Rebecca I love her. Tell her I never stopped loving her for even 1 second of these 12 years. She knows, Mom, Victoria said softly, watching more tears stream down Rebecca's face. She knows. At Riverside Falls Medical Center, doctors examined Rebecca carefully while Victoria sat beside her holding her hand, never letting go. They documented injuries, both old and new, evidence of years of abuse that made everyone in the room struggle to maintain their professional composure. But they also confirmed through dental records and the distinctive birthmark what everyone's hearts already knew. This was Rebecca Maria Torres, returned from the impossible after 12 years of captivity. At the police station afterward, Rebecca gave her statement in a quiet interview room with Victoria beside her, a trauma counselor present, and Detective Morrison asking questions as gently as possible. She told them everything, every horrific detail of her captivity, every day of suffering, every moment of fear and pain. She described the layout of Patterson's house, the basement room where she'd been imprisoned, the threats he'd made, the complete control he'd exerted over her life. While Rebecca talked, officers were simultaneously executing a search warrant at 847 Morton Road. Gerald Patterson had been arrested without incident, found in his living room watching television as if he had no concerns in the world. The search of his home revealed the basement prison exactly as Rebecca described, along with disturbing evidence of years of captivity. Rebecca's school clothes from 1996, photographs documenting her growth through the years. Journals Patterson had kept detailing his crimes in chilling detail. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Patterson didn't even attempt to deny what he'd done. When confronted with the evidence and Rebecca's testimony, he confessed to abducting her from the community garden that June afternoon, to holding her captive for 12 years, to the sustained abuse he'd inflicted. His only attempt at justification was claiming he'd loved Rebecca and had wanted to protect her from a world he deemed too dangerous for an innocent child. The confession made Victoria physically ill. The twisted logic of a predator attempting to justify stealing a child's entire childhood, destroying a family, causing immeasurable suffering. But it also meant Rebecca wouldn't have to endure a lengthy trial, wouldn't have to testify in open court about her trauma. Patterson was charged with kidnapping, unlawful confinement, and multiple counts of sexual assault of a minor. He eventually pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 45 years in prison without possibility of parole. The judge's words during sentencing were harsh and uncompromising. "You stole 12 years from this child," Judge Helena Rodriguez said, her voice cold with controlled fury. "You robbed her of her childhood, her adolescence, her freedom, her sense of safety in the world. You traumatized an entire family and community. You are a predator who took advantage of a child's trust, and you will spend the rest of your natural life in prison for these unspeakable crimes." At 2 a.m, after hours of statements and medical examinations and procedures, Victoria finally drove Rebecca home to Maple Street. Carmen was standing on the front porch under the porch light she'd left burning for 12 years, and when she saw her daughters emerge from Victoria's car, she ran down the steps with her arms outstretched. The reunion destroyed everyone who witnessed it. Carmen and Rebecca collapsed into each other's arms right there on the front lawn, both crying so hard they could barely stand, holding each other like letting go might make this miracle evaporate. Victoria wrapped her arms around both of them, and the 3 Torres women stood together under the stars, a family reunited after 12 years of unbearable separation. "You're home," Carmen kept whispering into Rebecca's hair. "You're finally home, my baby. You're safe now. I've got you." Rebecca's voice was muffled against her mother's shoulder. "I missed you so much, Mama. Every single day I missed you." They moved inside eventually, and Carmen led Rebecca upstairs to the bedroom that had been waiting like a time capsule. Rebecca stood in the doorway looking at her unchanged side of the room, her stuffed elephant, her drawings, her yellow backpack, and fell to her knees sobbing. "You really did wait for me," she whispered. "You really never gave up." "Never," Carmen said, kneeling beside her. "Not for one moment in 12 years. This is your home, Rebecca. It always has been, and it always will be. Recovery was a long and difficult journey that required patience, therapy, and unconditional love. Rebecca stayed with Carmen and gradually began relearning how to exist in the world outside of captivity. Simple things that most people took for granted: choosing her own clothes, deciding when to eat, walking outside alone, were challenges she faced with courage and determination. Victoria moved back into their childhood home to be closer to Rebecca during those first critical months. They fell back into old patterns, whispering to each other in the darkness. Rebecca finally feeling safe enough to sleep without nightmares for the first time in over a decade. The town of Riverside Falls rallied around the Torres family with overwhelming support. Neighbors brought food, offered childcare for when Rebecca needed therapy appointments, respected their privacy while making it clear the entire community stood ready to help however needed. The same town that had searched desperately 12 years ago now celebrated Rebecca's return while acknowledging the long road to healing ahead. 6 months after her rescue, Rebecca felt ready to begin speaking publicly about her experience. She started with small groups of other survivors, finding strength in shared experiences and providing hope to others still fighting through trauma. Eventually, she agreed to larger speaking engagements, telling her story to law enforcement groups, advocacy organizations, and anyone who would listen about the warning signs of predatory behavior and the importance of never giving up hope. "I want other victims to know they're not alone," Rebecca said during one interview. "I want families with missing loved ones to understand that miracles do happen, that you should never stop fighting, never stop hoping, never stop believing that your person might come home. And I want predators to know that their victims are stronger than they could ever imagine, that we survive and we rebuild and we refuse to let them win." Victoria became Rebecca's fiercest advocate and protector, using her experience to help other families navigating similar tragedies. She eventually went back to school to become a victim advocate, turning her pain and guilt into purpose and action that helped countless people. Carmen retired from nursing to focus on helping Rebecca heal, and the time they spent together slowly began building new memories to exist alongside the painful ones. They took trips to places Rebecca had dreamed about during her captivity, created new traditions to mark Rebecca's second chance at life, and learned together that healing isn't linear, but is always possible with love and support. Years later, the house on Maple Street no longer felt like a shrine to loss. It felt like a home again, filled with laughter and life and hope. The bedroom that had been frozen in time was gradually updated to reflect Rebecca's adult interests and personality. The yellow backpack was eventually moved to a memory box, honored but no longer dominating their daily lives. Rebecca never forgot the 12 years stolen from her. The trauma would always be part of her story, the scars both visible and invisible, a permanent reminder of what she'd survived. But she refused to let those years define her entire existence or limit her future possibilities. On quiet evenings, the three Torres women would sit together on their front porch, watching the sunset paint the Connecticut sky in colors Rebecca had been denied for so long. They'd talk about the day, make plans for tomorrow, simply exist together in the peace and safety of home. The past would never disappear, but it no longer controlled their present or their future. They'd survived the impossible, had been reunited against all odds, and had learned that even after 12 years in darkness, love could guide someone home. If Rebecca's story of survival and courage moved you, if it reminded you that hope should never die even in the darkest circumstances, then we need your help keeping these important stories alive. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss another story of survival and resilience. Share this video with someone who needs to believe in miracles, someone who's waiting for their own missing loved one, someone who needs to hear that recovery is possible even after unimaginable trauma. ***. Drop a comment below telling us what part of Rebecca's story impacted you most. And let us know where you're watching from so we can see how far these messages of hope are spreading. Every share, every like, every comment helps ensure that stories like Rebecca's reach the people who need them most. Other survivors, waiting families, and communities learning to watch for the warning signs that might save the next child. Asterisk, asterisk. There are thousands of families still waiting for their loved ones to come home. By supporting this channel and sharing these stories, you're helping keep those cases alive in public consciousness, helping spread awareness about predatory behavior, and giving hope to people who desperately need it. Subscribe now, and let's continue sharing these powerful stories of survival together. Thank you for being here, for caring, and for helping us amplify the voices of survivors who refuse to let darkness win. We'll see you in the next video. Asterisk, asterisk.